Have you ever stopped to think about how a simple idea in your head becomes a real physical action? Like deciding to pick up a coffee cup, and then you just do it? Or how you can spot a friend's face in a massive crowd almost instantly? It all boils down to the absolutely incredible machinery inside your nervous system. So we're about to take a whirlwind tour of the brain's most fundamental parts and the amazing electrical language they use to talk to each other. We're going to start with a number that is just, well, it's mind-blowing.
Okay, let's just start with this number, which is almost impossible to really picture. 86 billion. That's the best estimate we have for the number of neurons packed inside the average human brain. These are the main players, the messengers, and they are responsible for every single thought, every feeling, and every action you will ever have. It's a staggering amount.
But the story of the brain isn't just about neurons. The nervous system is really made up of two main kinds of cells. You've got the neurons, right? They're the stars of the show, the messengers that are constantly zipping electrical and chemical signals around. But working right alongside them, you have the glial cells. Honestly, think of them as the essential support staff, the roadies for the rock star neurons. They maintain, they protect, and they insulate the neurons, making sure that the whole incredible system runs like a well-oiled machine.
All right, so let's zoom in on our first main character, the neuron. At its heart, it's basically a biological information highway built for nothing but speed and incredible precision. The way a neuron is built is just perfectly designed for its job. You see, information comes in through these things called dendrites. They look kind of like tree branches, and they act like little antennas, just soaking up signals. Those signals then travel to the soma, which is just the main cell body where the nucleus lives. And if that signal is strong enough, bam, it gets sent flying down this long cable-like thing called the axon, all the way to the very end, to what are called the axon terminals. And this whole flow of information, it is strictly a one-way street. Neurons have this property called polarity. So signals are received by the dendrites, then they're integrated or, processed in the soma. From there, they're transmitted down the axon, and finally, these little chemical messengers are released from the axon terminals to talk to the next cell in the line. It's just a beautifully efficient and incredibly elegant system.
Okay, so we've met the messengers, the neurons. Now let's turn our spotlight over to the glia, which are truly the unsung heroes of the central nervous system. Seriously, they do so much work behind the scenes.
So what exactly do these support cells do? Well, in the central nervous system, you've got four main types of glia, and each one has a super specialized job. You can see them all here, kind of working together with the neuron. We have astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, and ependymal cells. So let's break down what each of these guys actually does. These analogies really make it click, right? So think of astrocytes as mission control. They're not just keeping the chemical environment stable, they're also building that super important blood-brain barrier, which basically acts as a bouncer, keeping bad stuff out of the brain. Then you've got the oligodendrocytes, the insulators. And hang on to that thought, because we'll come back to them. They are absolutely vital for signal speed. Microglia, they're the brain's dedicated security and janitorial crew, always on patrol, looking for damage, fighting off invaders, and cleaning up any messes. And finally, the ependymal cells are the fluid engineers, producing the cerebrospinal fluid that your brain is literally floating in right now.
So, we know neurons send signals, but how do they actually fire? This brings us to the absolute core mechanism of how neurons talk to each other, this electrical signal that we call the action potential.
When a neuron decides it's time to send a message, it generates this very distinct electrical spike, and that is the action potential. Now, the really important thing to get here is that it's a brief, all-or-nothing event. There's no such thing as a weak action potential. It's either on or it's off. And once it starts, it travels the entire length of the axon without losing any of its strength.
Let's walk through it step by step. So the neuron starts out just chilling at its resting state. Then an incoming signal gives it a little nudge, pushing its charge up to a critical threshold. That's the point of no return. Once it hits that, bam, sodium channels fly open, tons of positive ions rush in, and the neuron depolarizes. That's that huge spike you see. To reset itself, potassium channels open up, and positive ions rush back out during repolarization. It actually overshoots a little bit, that's called hyperpolarization, and then it settles back down to rest, ready to go all over again.
Okay, remember those oligodendrocytes we mentioned? The insulators? Well, this is their masterpiece, myelin. It's this fatty, insulating stuff that wraps itself around axons, and its purpose is incredibly simple but absolutely vital: to make electrical signals go faster. And I mean much, much faster.
But here's where it gets really clever. The myelin sheath isn't just one long continuous tube, it has these little exposed gaps in the insulation, and they're called the nodes of Ranvier. And these tiny little nodes are the secret ingredient to the brain's high-speed internet.
So instead of the signal flowing smoothly down the whole axon, the action potential literally jumps from one node to the next. This amazing process is called saltatory conduction, which comes from a Latin word that means to leap. This jumping allows the signal to travel up to 100 times faster than it could on an axon without myelin. It's basically like an express train that gets to skip all the local stops. It's just brilliant.
All right, we've seen how the individual cells work, which is awesome. Now, let's zoom out a bit and see how all these cells come together to build the larger structures of the nervous system.
When you look at brain tissue, you'll see it's made of two distinct types, gray matter and white matter. And here's a really great way to think about them. The gray matter, which is where all the neuron cell bodies are, acts like the computers. This is where all the processing, all the thinking and interpreting happens. The white matter, on the other hand, is made of all those myelinated axons we talked about. It acts like the cables, just transmitting information from one computer to another.
And here's a really fascinating detail about our anatomy. The way gray and white matter are arranged is completely flipped between the brain and the spinal cord. In your brain, the gray matter, the processing centers, is on the outside, which forms the cortex. But in your spinal cord, it's the opposite. The white matter, those transmission cables, is on the outside, and the gray matter is tucked safely away on the inside.
Now, to really understand neuroanatomy, you've got to speak the language. And here's a really crucial point that can trip people up. We use different names for the exact same structures, just depending on their location. So for example, a cluster of neuron cell bodies inside the central nervous system, we call that a nucleus. But that very same type of cluster out in the peripheral nervous system, we call it a ganglion. Same thing for the wiring. A bundle of axons is a tract when it's in the CNS, but we call it a nerve when it's out in the PNS. It's the same stuff, it's just in a different zip code, so it gets a different name.
So, we've gone through the cells, the signals, the structures, the whole shebang. But it all leads to this really profound final question. Everything we have talked about at its very core is just a series of simple electrical sparks. An action potential is just an action potential, right? It's the same signal every time. So how does the brain take one of those identical sparks and turn it into the beautiful sight of a sunset, and another one into the sound of your favorite song, and yet another one into a complex thought or an emotion? That right there is the great mystery of consciousness, all built from the simple and elegant physiology we've just explored.